Welcome to the Korea Pro podcast. I'm your host, Jeongmin Kim, the editorial director of Korea Pro.
And I'm John Lee, the editor of Korea Pro.
Join us for a weekly 15-minute conversation as we dive into the most pressing stories shaping South Korea and dissect the most complicated ones for you.
From politics to culture, technology to society, we've got you covered. So stay ahead of the curve and never be sidelined again.
So get ready for a fresh perspective on South Korea's news. This is the Korea Pro podcast.
All right, everyone. Welcome back to the Korea Pro podcast. It is now Thursday, June 20th, about 3 p.m., and we have got a lot of things to talk about. And of course, we have to start with China.
Yes, China. Well, this was supposed to be one of the biggest security or foreign policy related meeting in South Korea this week. But then, of course, the spotlight
went elsewhere.
It was stolen north of the border. But let's start talking about this dialogue first. This was a channel, 2+2 channel that was created in the summit, right?
Right. The summit took place in late May, and they said that they're going to have increased coordination, increased talks. And so this was a 2+2 talks, as you just mentioned, between the South Korean and Chinese foreign and defense ministries. Now, this was in the vice-ministerial levels.
Right. It's not ministerial. It's sort of like vice minister and also 국장급 bureau chief level, right?
Right. And these are the important ones. That's where they hammer out all of their differences.
Right, exactly. It's a working level talk, basically. So what did they actually discuss?
Well,
how much do we know?
That's the thing. We don't really know all that much. And that's because, after all of these talks, typically what the governments do is that they typically say, we will agree as to when we will publish, and we will have these very same talking points, and we'll have the same announcements, but that didn't happen.
Like, even generically, usually it comes a few hours after the meeting, and honestly,
not more than 2.
Yeah, and also I did hear from one of the government agencies that the press release will come out at like 5 p.m., but it didn't, and then South Korea took forever. And when did they publish that generic statement? It was like around midnight, right?
The meeting took place on Tuesday at around 4 p.m. All of the results should have been out by 6, but apparently the talks went on until past 7 o'clock. They even had dinner while talking, and eventually they did release their statement, but it came out at 12:20 a.m.
Right. So it shows that there were a lot of stuff that they probably had to discuss considering the recent security environment. But then the Chinese side, it's still silent.
They published even later. They published at 4 p.m. But their statements is also quite absent regarding what happened in North Korea.
So right, it's nothing burger. And so the thing is that maybe it's coincidence, but the meeting came on the same day.
It did. Well, Putin eventually went to North Korea about a day later because,
Right, same day that all the international media was waiting for Putin's flight to land in North Korea.
Putin pulled a Putin, and he went very late.
3 a.m. Mm-hmm. And Kim Jong-un had to wait. And let's move on to this next topic. Although this is strictly sort of relates to NK News and NK Pro site, but then this actually impacts South Korea and South Korean allies and partners. So we have to discuss it. So the gist of they signed a treaty.
A comprehensive partnership agreement.
Right. So there are a few. It seems a lot of media outlets are interpreting this differently, even after North Korea published the full text of the treaty. This is a very rare thing to publish. They say something like providing mutual
military aid,
mutual assistance, military or others, in cases of either side being invaded and entering a state of war.
If either country faces aggression.
No, it's 침공.
Oh, invasion. Okay, all right.
So it's kind of vague, actually, the assistant part. So I think some people are interpreting this as 자동 개입, 자동 군사 개입 조항, which means mutual automatic.
Kind of like what the U.S. and South Korea has.
Right, but some people are interpreting this as quasi-alliance because, first of all, Putin didn't mention the alliance word, only Kim Jong-un did.
Right.
And it sort of sounds like the assistance could be everything. So what's your take on this? What's the implication for South Korea regarding this treaty?
Well, first I have to say that it does, this lack of coherent messaging from North Korea and Russia kind of reflects what's going on in South Korea and the U.S. With the whole Nuclear Consultative Group thing.
Oh, yeah, that's a good comparison.
Yeah.
Right, one side wants it more.
Well, South Korea is always saying it's a nuclear-based alliance, and the U.S. is saying, no, it ain't. And this is the same thing that's happening in North Korea and Russia. North Korea is saying it's an alliance, and Putin himself never used that word.
So, yeah, and to put on my NK News hat for a little bit, although this is Korea Pro podcast, it actually comes after North Korea announced something like, we are separate countries now. And this is the first alliance-looking thing that they're getting. So, optic-wise, they probably really, really wanted this.
Oh, yeah, they're desperate for this because, they're not in a very good spot. Their economy has been in the trash can for decades at this point, and they're really trying to get any kind of leg up. And this would be a huge benefit for them if it is actual alliance.
But what does Russia get and what does Russia risk in terms of Russia-South Korea relations as well? Because it's not like North Korea-South Korea relations between Russia and South Korea.
Well, at this point, it seems to me that Putin's thinking that he doesn't have a whole lot to lose. South Korea already...
With South Korea.
With South Korea. South Korea already imposed sanctions in 2022, in March 2022, I believe. And then in April of this year, South Korea also imposed unilateral sanctions on several individuals who were helping North Korea evade sanctions. And so South Korea-Russia relations is already in the toilet at this point.
Well, but it's kind of confusing because earlier this year, Yoon's focus was to reinstate the Russia-South Korea trade relations.
You're talking about his press conference, right?
Yeah. And then other government agencies also followed up, emphasizing that point as well. Like political and trade, they want to separate that. But how does this work now?
I don't think it can actually work. South Korea might be saying that, but as long as sanctions are in place and as long as South Korea is a U.S. ally, we really can't divorce politics and trade with Russia at this point. And I think Putin already sees that. And so he seems to be thinking that there's nothing really left to lose with South Korea. But we have to mention that when Putin mentioned earlier this month that he was expressing appreciation that South Korea did not provide weapons to Ukraine directly. He did, however, mention that Moscow is still monitoring how South Korea is selling weapons to U.S. contractors, and the U.S. is using these weapons and supplying them to other countries that eventually give them to Ukraine. And so, South Korea never directly provided aid to Ukraine, but as far as Putin's concerned, he doesn't really care.
Yeah, maybe that's why he did not go as far as stating this is an unwavering alliance, like Kim Jong-un said.
It might not be an alliance from his perspective, but it's definitely his way of pressuring South Korea. He can push this further with North Korea to corner South Korea a bit more, but that's his way of trying to leverage North Korea over the South.
Right, and there are gazillion types of interpretation of the treaty from many, many experts right now, but my guess is they will leave this vague like this going forward.
Why not? If it's vague, then people can imagine all kinds of scenarios,
exactly.
And that's exactly what they want.
Right. And let's move on to implications to South Korea-China relations. Back to our first topic. What kind of pressure does this put on Beijing and South Korea?
Well, that's the thing. Well, obviously the pressure on South Korea is quite obvious. But on China, it's a bit of a question.
China is in a very awkward position, honestly. Right now.
China has this bromance with Russia at this moment. I forget what the exact term is.
And they did the summit as well.
Right, the No Limits Alliance or partnership or whatever it was.
So that's why many experts were thinking that initially that they might do like a trilateral alliance, which I thought was not going to happen. But
well, China's in a very odd spot because, it's got that relationship with Russia and it's obviously has that mutual defense treaty with North Korea as well. But we have to remember that when we had that Korea, China, Japan trilateral summit, in their joint statements, they mentioned the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula.
Although it was probably not their wording, it was South Koreans' wording, but still, it was in the joint statement.
It was in the statements.
So they did make that concession.
Right.
So they care about relations with South Korea and Japan as well. And also, they're trying to earn this leadership role in the global South and, multipolar world, blah, blah, blah. So it's, China is in a more precarious position when it comes to these issues compared to Russia.
I'm not sure if precarious is the right word, but it's in a very awkward position.
Yeah, awkward.
Yeah,
would be the right word.
They're in this spot where they have to show support to North Korea and Russia, their partners, but they also don't want to be lumped in with them because economic sanctions.
Yeah, but also we saw that multiple times at UN General Assembly and so on and so forth, with China's like different votes when it comes to like war in Middle East, war in Ukraine, blah 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 blah.
Unlock the full Korea Pro experience by joining our community. Stay informed, stay ahead, and never miss a beat on Korean affairs that matter. Subscribe today and transform the way you understand Korea.
And let's move on to further implications for South Korea. This is not just about this region. South Korea is actually trying to diversify its supply chain and also arms exports and so on and so forth. And on the same week, this week, there were some discussion about further ties with Poland and Romania, I believe.
Yeah, Defense Minister Shilon Shik has spent this past few days in those two countries right now. And there have been news reports about how Poland wants to buy additional K2 battle tanks. We don't know how much or how many, but that has been the announcement. But the more concrete announcement is from Romania. They want to buy K9 howitzers from South Korea, about $920 million worth of equipment.
Oh, that's big.
That's a huge chunk of change. And so this is going to annoy Putin as well, because as we mentioned earlier, Putin has been monitoring how South Korea has been selling weapons to these countries. But this has allowed those countries to, since they're buying new weapons from South Korea, they can donate their older weapons and munitions to Ukraine.
Right.
And so this is something that has been ruffling Putin's feathers for quite a little bit. But now that South Korea is selling more weapons to Poland and Romania, Russia is going to look at this very unkindly, and they're going to use this new partnership with North Korea to try to squeeze South Korea a bit more. But will South Korea bend? That's another question, because this is a lot of money that South Korea just cannot say no to.
Exactly. And also, what's going to happen with South Korea, U.S., and Japan security posture going forward? Because I believe that Freedom Edge, the first trilateral sort of named drill, is coming up sometime probably next week. I know that I read reports that USS Roosevelt will be visiting the Busan port soon. So what's Japan's position in all of this?
Well, I'm pretty sure that right now Japan is feeling quite comfortable. South Korea will really need to amp up their cooperation with the U.S. and Japan now. And Japan is going to be a much more important partner to South Korea than it has been in the past. So I think Japan is in a quite comfortable position. But the question is, what's going to happen after Yoon leaves office? As long as Yoon is in office, this trilateral partnership with the U.S. and Japan will remain strong. It might even go stronger, perhaps. But, you know, his approval rating is 26%. And when he leaves office, there's a very good chance that the next president, whoever that person may be, will come from the opposition party.
Right.
And that opposition party has stated numerous times that they're concerned about how South Korea's ties with Russia and China have deteriorated under Yoon's presidency. And so will this trilateral partnership go on after Yoon's presidency? That's the real big question.
And what if Trump comes in on top of that and say that he will end the Ukraine war in 24 hours?
Well, if Yoon comes back in November, if Trump comes back in November and Yoon
Freudian
is still, yeah, Yoon, Trump, who cares? But let's go back to that.
Yeah.
If Trump comes back in November and Yoon is still in office, now this will have a lot of impact on SMA negotiations, special measures agreements about defense cost sharing. And if Trump comes back, he's going to say, hey, I want you to pay $5 billion per year or whatever he says. But what will South Korea's response be?
Your impression got a little bit better.
Thank you. I've been practicing.
I hope you're listening, Ben.
And so will South Korea say, okay, we'll pay whatever you want? Or will South Korea try to push back a bit? And if it does, what will that happen to the alliance? Big question marks everywhere.
Week ahead, like I mentioned, there probably will be the Freedom Edge trilateral drill sometime in the next 10 days, because the allies, I think they said something like end of June or before the end of June. It's going to be multi-facet sort of drill, right?
Land, sea, air, cyber, all of it.
And it also makes sense that it comes after the Russia-North Korea summit, right?
We have to show a strong response to what's been going on the north of the DMZ. So anything less than that will look very weak.
And when it comes to, sorry, this is also North Korea, but inter-Korean tension, it's sort of dialed down a little bit, thankfully.
Well, just a bit, but that's because, both countries have been a little busy with other relations.
Yeah, so we don't know what's going to happen next week, if the South Koreans are going to turn on the loudspeaker again, or maybe there would be more balloons. We just don't know. We'll keep an eye on it. And domestic politics, it will be a battle next week.
Lee Jae-myung.
Lee Jae-myung is facing an additional court case related to
Again, North Korea.
And also his leadership issue. What's going on there?
Well, the question is he going to remain as a Democratic Party leader?
You mean after the leadership election?
Right, after the leadership election. And if he does remain as a leader, what does that what kind of implications will that have for the Democratic Party if he's found guilty regarding all the money and the remittances that were sent to North Korea?
This is a very long shot chance, but also, what if Lee Jae-myung, in a surprise move, is not voted as a leader?
I have not considered that actually, because I was going to, I was under the impression that he's guaranteed a shoo-in. But if he's not elected as the leader, the Democratic Party is going to be in a lot of trouble, because
a lot
who
of
else?
infight. Like it's not clear who's second in line right now, right?
There's no one else besides Lee Jae-myung who's calling the shots right now. And if he leaves that leadership position, the Democratic Party is going to devolve into a lot of infighting.
So keep an eye on that. And for more details in full, check out your Week Ahead newsletter at 2 p.m. on Mondays.
And subscribe for more.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in.
If you want to know more, sign up for our daily executive briefings. We brief you on all you need to know from the past 24 hours and why they matter every morning in your inboxes.
Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast for your weekly dose of insight. And until next time, I'm Jeongmin Kim.
And I'm John Lei. Stay connected, stay informed, and we'll see you next time on the Korea Pro Podcast.